be also opening up the chat for questions. So please don't hesitate to type questions in there as Ethan is speaking, so you can have those questions answered or be putting them in there in real time. Like I said, we are going to be adding some time here at the end. Ethan will present for, what would you say, Ethan, 10 to 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, PowerPoint's pretty quick.
Fantastic time at the end there again for your individualized questions. So Ethan again is with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and he is the manager for congressional and public affairs. And he's actually worked in variety of positions for the Minnesota House of Representatives as the committee legislative assistant for the Education Policy Committee and the Taxes Committee, as well as a communication specialist in the Republican media department. And then he also has worked for and volunteered for multiple campaigns in Minnesota. So he's pretty familiar with what's happening with legislation now. And as we go on through the event here, feel free to again ask those questions in the chat box, and then we'll be waiting at the end and listening in for additional questions. So Ethan, I'm going to pass this over to you. You are set up as a co-host, so please feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Perfect, thank you. I will do that now, share my screen so I can get that PowerPoint up. All right, there we go. I'm just gonna move everybody to the bottom so I can see the PowerPoint. All right. So we're here mostly to talk about the American Rescue Plan. However, we can go back and talk about any program in any of the past packages. I believe the American Rescue Plan is the 5th COVID package that has been passed. So obviously we've been kind of drinking from a fire hose, especially people that are trying to utilize these programs. Obviously it's even a little more complicated than just knowing what they are and trying to explain them. So I'll do the best I can here, but I want to leave a lot of time for question and answer. The new program that came out of this bill was the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Probably heard this is a program that's coming out through the SBA. It's really for the restaurant business or anyone who serves food, or the main part of their business is serving food. Their grants, they're capped at $5 million per restaurant or $10 million total if you own multiple units. The calculation to figure out what you qualify for is actually very simple. You're going to look at your revenue from 2019, look at your revenue from 2020, you subtract the idea that your revenue in 2019 was higher, and that will be the difference of what you get for the grant. What's nice about this, as I said, it's through the SBA. It's just a grant. There's no forgiveness process. You don't have to go through your lender or anything like that. I saw a report today. Looks like this program will open in the next 30 days is kind of what the SBA is saying. So if you're a restaurant on this call, or if you're listening, to the tape version of this, it should be up soon. However, if 30 days is too far from now, and normally 30 days when you're talking with the federal government, plan on the kind of the larger side of 30 days, maybe even longer. If you need a PPP loan and you qualify to hold you over until then, get the PPP loan. Because if you get one, what they'll just do is whatever you qualify for and whatever your PPP loan amount is, they'll just take that off as well. So if you can't wait the 30 days, get the PPP loan. Another thing that I've heard, and the SBA has finally come out and said and confirmed this, is that you're going to want to get a DUNS number and then take your DUNS number and get a SAM number. So DUNS number is through Dun and Bradstreet, I believe is the firm. Go on their website. It's a free service. You'll get the number. From there, you'll want to go to sam.gov and get the SAM number, and that's the number that you get to qualify for these, government grant programs. It's just kind of just a way to track you, not track you in a negative sense way, but track where the money is going. To not qualify, if you own 20 or more locations, or if you're publicly traded, you will not qualify. We can talk more about this, but I think I kind of got the basic idea out there. Employee retention tax credit. This program has changed so many times. I can see where a lot of people are confused, but I'm gonna try to best explain it. Right now, and I think this is how it'll be until this program is done at the end of the year, it's a 70% tax credit on $10,000 worth of wages. So that's a complicated way to say it's a $7,000 tax credit. However, that's $7,000 per employee per quarter. So if you're going to utilize this credit the entire year, you can get up to $28,000 per worker. That was a change. This program was cut off at the end of quarter 2, but now it goes to the end of the year. To qualify, you have to have a 20% cut in your gross revenue in a quarter compared to 2019. And if you have less than 500 people working for you. There's also a new version that if you're a newer business, you open kind of around the time the pandemic started, you can qualify for this on a limited basis as well. At the top there in the title, I say IRS because this is obviously a tax program. You're going to want to use your tax accountant or whoever does your bookkeeping, and the IRS is the one that's in charge of this program. And I have refundable at the top because let's say you qualify, let's say for $28,000 per worker, you have 10 workers, $280,000, but that's more than what you pay in payroll. If there's a difference between what your payroll tax is and what you qualify for, the federal government is going to write you a check for the difference. So it's a refundable tax credit, same way that you'd file your taxes. Same sort of ideal in the form of it being a refundable credit. There's no max that you can hit. So the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, this is like the restaurant grant. This is ran through the SBA. Just found out the other day that it's going to open on April 8th. It's going to, they're first going to look at businesses that have suffered the most, and they're going to start with them, people who've had like a 90% or greater loss, and then they'll move down to 70%. So they really want to hit the shuttered venues that have really been struggling the most. And just like the restaurant grant, you want to get that DUNS and SAMS number. To qualify, you have to have at least 70% of earned income generated by live events. So you can't be, a bar that brings in somebody to perform on Fridays, that doesn't count. If you're that bar, you should really go to the restaurant fund. They don't really want these intermingling. Qualifiers, you have to have 500 or fewer people working for you. You have to have a 25% cut in gross revenue. The calculation is a little more complex than the restaurant one. I'll summarize it as best as that this is 45% of your gross revenue in 2019. That's also capped at $10 million. If you were a business that started after the 19th of January of 2019, your grant amount, what you want to do is every month that you were in business during 2019, you're going to want to find the average of your revenue, and then you'll multiply it by 6. Again, both these calculations are capped at $10 million. There's no more than $10 million that you can get. Also, there's some flexibility now with the PPP loan. If you took a PPP loan after December 22nd or 27th of 2020, they'll just cut that off of whatever the grant is you get. So again, if you're a live venue on here and you can't make it any longer and you want to get that PPP loan, definitely go for it, and they'll just cut it off the top of your grant. Both this and the restaurant fund, it's really used to be for your payroll, your rent, your kind of day-to-day operations, getting PPE, that sort of nature. They don't want you to buy another location and expand. That's not really the idea of the program. It's to keep you going through the rest of this year and through hopefully the rest of the pandemic. Again, if we have more questions on that, we can come back. Other changes, if you remember all the way back to this time last spring, was the first coronavirus bill that we passed. And there was a mandate on there for businesses that had less than 500 people working for them to provide a paid leave. The mandate expired at the end of the year, but this tax credit's still there. So if you're willing to pay people that have to quarantine, or if they're recovering from coronavirus, or they're going out to get vaccinated, or they have to take care of a child because of a school closure, or if they're quarantining, and you pay them, you can qualify for a tax credit. I guess really important thing is that the mandate's there, so you no longer have to do it. Unemployment, that was extended through the 6th of September. As you remember, it's whatever you get from the state plus $300 a month, or $300 a week, excuse me. Plus there is a benefit for people who don't normally qualify for UI. Think of independent contractors and those. There's a program for them, and then also people who maybe had previously, exhausted their UI. There's a program for them to get it this way as well. Essentially the same thing that has been going on over the last year, except it's no longer $600. It's no longer $600 a week plus up. It's only $300, and that the program will expire on September 6th. State and local funding, cover this quickly. A lot of money is coming to a lot of states. Simply, they want the money to be used to respond to anything COVID related, anything that's been, affecting the economy. So think back of the programs that Wisconsin started last year. I would assume most states will probably carry on with their same programs, and they might come up with some new ones because there's quite frankly a lot of money coming in. There's a little more flexibility with this money compared to the last. You can make investments into water, sewer, and broadband, even if it's not related to COVID-19. So it's not just a COVID slush fund for the state, but you can also use it to make other investments. I think things that we know we can't use it for. You can't use it to backfill any pension obligations. Probably not an issue in Wisconsin, but I think of a state like Illinois, they can't use the money for that. We're looking for clarity on the next thing, and that is that you can't use it to offset any tax cuts that were enacted after March 3rd. And we all know that a tax cut is technically spending because you're sending money back. Looking for a little clarity on what that means and what exactly qualifies under that tax cut. But that's more of a worry for your state officials and the governor. Wisconsin total is getting $5.7 billion from the federal government. Your town will get a share of $1.99 million, almost $2 million, and $8.8 million for Dunn County. On top of that $5.7 billion that the state's getting, they're also getting $582 million for childcare, $15.5 million for Head Start, a little over $1.5 billion for K-12, and $560 million for higher ed. For more information, go to uschamber.com/coronavirus, where we have a lot of guidance. Excuse me. It's not the actual application or the process you need to go through to qualify for these programs, but it's a good way to kind of see what the programs are, kind of run your numbers and see if you actually want to go through the app process. But I think we should go on to questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much, Ethan. Some good information, especially from a local level here. We do have a question in the chat box here, so let's go ahead and start with that.
Yep.
And note that this is open Q&A, so if you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself. We can definitely have a conversation. Otherwise, do throw those questions down in the chat box if you'd prefer that method. But where would a bus tour company fit? So like a travel type. So these are typically, and Janet or John, if you'd like to expand on that, but taking folks from point A to point B from a tourism standpoint and visiting different locations, going to events, different things like that. Would they fit in any of these guidelines?
I would look at the PPP route. I mean, that's that's kind of your best area to look. If you didn't get a PPP loan before, you'll qualify under the previous rules, kind of what we've been working on. If you have gotten one, you can qualify again for a second draw as long as you have a 25% cut in your gross revenue and you have less or equal to 300 people working for you. Those are kind of the main qualifiers. Those that are in the hospitality section, and I don't know for sure, but I believe this falls out of the hospitality section. Normally, when you're qualifying for PPP, you take your average monthly income or average monthly revenue and you multiply it by 2.5. If you're in the hospitality sector, you can multiply it by 3.5. I would follow up with your lender to see. I could see a little gray area there where you could almost see it as hospitality. I know there's a qualifier that very easy to eliminate what is hospitality and what is not. But I would follow up with your lender, and they'll be able to kind of better show you where you qualify. But PPP, generally speaking, would be your best route. And what's nice is that if you have not taken a PPP loan, you can take a first draw now, spend it out. You don't have to go through the forgiveness process. And if you still qualify for a second PPP loan, you can take that as well. The unfortunate news is that PPP, as of right now, is over on the 31st. However, there's a bill that has passed the House and is going to the Senate, I believe, today, and President Biden has said he'd sign it. It's to extend PPP another 60 days and then give SBA and lenders another 30 days to kind of wrap up the loans. The loans are coming out as quickly as before because there's a fraud process that they're running them through, which has kind of slowed it down. Good in the sense that they're kind of cut back on the fraud, but bad in the sense that the money isn't getting out as quickly as they had wanted. So that's why they're looking at having another 60 days to offer PPP loans and then another 30-day approval process between lenders and the SBA.
Good question. Give it a few seconds here. I think I saw Janet asking a question.
If not, you can always, send an email. I'm happy to answer over email. I got my phone number too. I believe you guys have all that. If not, I can get it to you.
Well,
Um,
definitely send that out too. So Ethan, one of the questions that we've been asked is how will folks access the local funding? So you had it was nearly $2 million worth of funding specific to Menominee and obviously over 8 million for Dunn County. How are folks able to access those local funds?
So the money that comes to your city, your city council and mayor will set up a program. I live in Prior Lake, Minnesota, and my brother, uh, he lives in Lakeville. He's on, which is just east of Prior Lake, if you know the Twin Cities Metro. He's on the city council. And what they did is they kind of set up their own business grant program, and they were handing out, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was about $10,000 grants. Businesses would apply, kind of show where they're at financially, and they could get up to that $10,000 grant. It's city can kind of do their own version of PPP or their own grant program. Um, and what's nice is that it's a little bit easier to probably go through and get just because it's through local government. A lot less hoops to jump through. And if you got a PPP loan, you can still get that. But it's really up to the city to kind of make their own rules of what they're going to do. There'll be guidance from Treasury that will come down and kind of give them a framework to work with. But if there was a business grant program in your town before, I would assume they would probably fire that back up. Obviously, no guarantee. I don't know your city council or mayor. But I would assume if they had a program and they deemed it as successful, they'd probably just refill that fund back up and hopefully start running it again, or maybe even do something better. They might be looking for input. Never hurts to reach out to them. You can let them know what you're feeling. That's what's nice about local government, easy to reach out to them, and it's easy to, affect and change policy. So I'd recommend if there wasn't a business grant program before, or maybe you weren't aware of it, reach out and say, hey, there's a lot of towns that did this, and I think we should be one of them.
And do you know, Ethan, will there be a deadline for when local municipalities have to have those funds spent or distributed?
I would expect it to be in the guidance from Treasury. I think it'll be a pretty long range. I don't think it'll be an issue where counties and cities are going to sit on it, because quite frankly, they not only need it for businesses in town, but they need it probably for themselves. They probably don't have the same money to fund the fire department that they had before in 2019, or police, whatever the case is. I'd have to imagine most cities aren't going to sit on it long. But then again, there's some cities across country that are doing better than ever, that quite frankly don't need the money. They're going to get it to a certain extent, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of guidance and parameter. But the idea is to give these cities and towns and counties a lot of flexibility.
So
Any other questions?
I have a list of questions, but I want to make sure from what we've been asked. So I want to make sure that you all are having an opportunity to ask your questions in real time as well. With the employee retention tax credit, I know that there have been some provisions about how that's utilized in combination with PPP or around PPP. Can you offer any insight to how they do not work together per se?
Sure. Well, when the CARES Act passed last year, they did not work together at all, and that's why a lot of that the money for the tax credit, people didn't utilize it, because quite frankly, PPP was a better deal and it was easier to get, and you didn't have to go through the IRS to get PPP. That being said, I would highly suggest taking advantage of it now, because you can get a PPP loan and that. Now, what you can't do is, let's say, Jim, who works for you, he makes $1,000 a week. You can't take $1,000 from your PPP loan and pay him, and take $1,000 from your tax credit, and then all of a sudden Jim's getting $2,000. You can't do that. But what you can do is, if you get the PPP loan and you run out of that, then you take your tax credit money and you start paying them with that. So while you can't spend $2 on a dollar item, it gives you flexibility to kind of hold on to it. And what's nice about PPP is that while the idea is to cover people's payroll and kind of keep them on the same track of that they've always been paid on. That was the whole idea under PPP. 40% of the money you get from PPP can be spent on other things like rent, your gas bill, your electric bill, kind of your keep the lights on charges is what I like to call them. And also, let's say you're a restaurant and you decided to add a drive-through. You can use PPP to cover that. I don't think you guys had this issue, but if you had something that we had in the Twin Cities over the summer, and they burned something down or they smashed a window, you can take money to fix your business from your PPP loan. However, you still have to spend 60% on payroll. But the biggest change to the tax credit, and why I think many businesses should take advantage of it, is that now it works with the other programs. You don't have to pick and choose. You can pick both and kind of decide which works best for you.
Thank you for that. I know that we've also had some questions about the shuttered venue grant and what qualifies as a venue. In some of the writings, it states that you have to have seating or different provisions with that. Can you expand a little bit on what's technically considered a venue?
Yeah. So, I think your neighbor to the east there, they have a lot of theaters and venues there, and yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's theaters, it's amphitheaters. A safe way is that if you own a business and you got seats bolted to the floor and there's a stage in front of you, you're probably a venue. There's better qualifiers on the SBA's website, and if you think you're kind of on the fence, you can always reach out and ask. They'll clarify it for you. But if you don't get 70% of your revenue based on having live events from having theater production or artists coming in to play music, whatever the case may be, if live event is not the main source of your revenue, then you don't qualify. Similar with the restaurant grant, you have to be a traditional food provider. Caterers and some of those other outside food providing businesses that aren't restaurants do qualify. Looking for clarity, I've had a few questions about country clubs, since a lot of their revenue probably does come from food and alcohol, but they also charge a monthly, membership. So that's kind of confusing. Looking for a little clarity on that. But generally speaking, I think if I hate to say it so simply, but if you kind of use a little bit of common sense, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like, oh, can I squeeze in here and do this, and sometimes you end up getting yourself in more trouble than it's worth. And there's always PPP, which I still think is a great program. It's had its issues. But what's nice is it's running now and you can start there, and you can always, reach out to the SBA and, expand, and maybe you do qualify for one of these other programs. The restaurant fund, I will say, I think it's $28 billion. That's going to go really fast. So if you are a restaurant, get that Dunn's number, get the Sam's number, be ready to go when that opens. I don't know if there's going to be, maybe Congress comes back and they refill some of these funds, but I would not expect to see another stimulus bill coming out. I would assume this is the end, unless something absolutely catastrophic happens, which I think we'd all rather just not have a huge flare up and all of a sudden we're back home again and everything's awful. But I would plan on this being the last stimulus package.
Leaving some time for questions here. If you have individual questions that are specific to your business, please feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, you can also drop them down in the chat box. So Ethan, for businesses that may not have qualified for first round of PPP, but they applied for the second round of PPP and were awarded funds, can they backtrack and apply for that first PPP even if they didn't qualify? Or is it we applied for the second PPP, received it, and that's the end for that business specifically?
I mean, pretty much if you didn't qualify for the first round, which it was pretty hard to not qualify for, if you truly were a small business, they really wanted to open up to everybody. So chances are if you did not qualify, you cannot get the second draw PPP because they kind of restricted it. As I said, you have to have less than 300 people instead of 500 people. And this time you actually have to display that you've had a hit to your revenue in the tune of 25%. The first round of PPP, you didn't have to show anything. You could have been high on the hog, but you could have still qualified for PPP. They wanted to, they really wanted to target the struggling businesses the second round. That said, let's say you were doing fine 2020, all of a sudden 2021 turns around, and let's say, I don't want to use any, business as an example, but let's say all of a sudden what your business in is really slowed down, and you're going, boy, I need that first round PPP. Well, you can still get the first round PPP, and kind of like I said, you can spend it out. You don't have to go through the forgiveness process yet. I would start it once you spend it out, but you can go roll right into applying for a second drop PPP. So, and again, like I said, PPP technically ends at the end of the month, but it's looking promising that Congress is going to give a 60-day extension plus another 30 days for them, not Congress, but for lenders and the SBA to go through the approval process and make sure the money is getting out there, because that, like I said, has really slowed down, which is good in the fact that sports teams aren't getting PPP funds. I'm trying to think of all the horror stories that came out of there's people that were defrauding the government. They've really been able to crack down on that, but in that process, it's slowed down money getting to good people and businesses that really need it.
I have a question, if I can
Yeah.
butt in. I've heard mixed kind of answers on this relating to the shared venue operating grant and applying for the second round of PPP. At first, I heard that you had to choose one or the other, and then I heard you could do both. And maybe you already talked about this. Sorry, I joined late. And then I heard you could apply for both, and then I heard maybe it went back to just choosing one again. Do you have any clarity on that?
Yes.
And if you can apply for both, was the deadline extension for the PPP2 extended?
We're hoping the PPP deadline is extended, looking hopefully towards the end of May. What Congress has the appetite to hand out at this time. The House has passed it, the Senate, I believe, it up today. As far as PPP and charter venue, yes. At first, it was confusing that if you got PPP after December 27th, then you can't get the shuttered venue. And they said, no, that's not going to work because now the shuttered venue grant's taken so long to get online. As long as you've taken the PPP before you've gotten the shuttered venue grant money, then you're safe. They'll just subtract off your PPP loan amount from whatever you would get for the. So you can kind of treat PPP as kind of like a cash advance to the grant that's coming.
So it's almost like a wash.
It is like a wash.
Okay.
Really, the biggest thing you can't do is you can't get the shuttered venue grant and then go, now I'm going to get PPP. You got to get PPP first, and then you can get the shuttered venue grant, or you can not get PPP at all and just go right for the shuttered venue grant, depending on how much time you think you have.
Perfect. That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great question, Lucas. Any other questions that you would have? We have about 1 minute left. As I said, this is kind of the quick and dirty. We wanted to get you in and out within 30 minutes. So get another round robin around here.
I'll leave it with this. And I feel like I haven't said this enough on Zoom calls, is that I really want to thank all the businesses that have stayed open, been able to pay their workers. Businesses have stepped up big here, and quite frankly, they didn't have to. Government shut down business didn't shut themselves down, but business was still willing to stand up and help every person that they can and help the town or the county or wherever they live. So thanks for doing that. And I hope the money that's coming from the federal government can at least keep you guys going. But I don't know, I just realized I haven't said that enough, and I want to make sure I said it to your group. So thank you. You guys have been heroes during this.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much for your time today. More information to come on city and county opportunities with that funding that is specific to Menominee and Dunn County. We have been in touch with both the city and the county and are in conversations on how that will be used. And if there's a way that we can help promote that to our chamber members. So stay in tune to that. More information to come as that evolves. And Ethan, again, thank you so much for your time. I do have Ethan's contact information. So if you are looking for any additional responses to questions that you may have after this, please don't hesitate to get a hold of us, and I'm happy to pass that information along. But thank you for joining us today. Thank you again, Ethan. We definitely appreciate your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.